kind of dumb way investor turned $40,000 into fortune. Yet another shameless advertorial from a buyer's agent. Let's fact check this and hopefully not roast them too hard. Now, the premise of this article, which has me concerned that could potentially mislead people, is that someone that's 32 years old, a property investor, which could be you or me, right, has $40,000 super prior to being 32 years old, but then at 32 years old, through property investment strategies, which obviously he will propose in this article, now has $2 million retirement fund in his super at 32. Now, old mate over here, he's on this platform. He's also on mainstream media. Kudos to you. 100 properties, over $65 million. You're helping your clients achieve that as well. That's great to you. But this article, in terms of what you're trying to say through super to achieve what you have achieved, can be misleading, and I just want to address that. Now, despite the underdog story, you work at Macca's, you were uneducated, blah, 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 and then 14 years later, you built up a massive portfolio of properties. We get that. That's the underdog battler story, which, every article would put in. But let's address the issue. With the $40,000 sitting in your super fund, which I assume is your SMSF, which is your self-managed super fund, a few years ago can make people think, oh, just a couple of years ago, 1 or 2 years. No, let's just assume you did this 5 to 8 years ago. It could be misleading when you say to people that you turn a $40,000 balance to a $2 million balance in your super fund at 32, but then in the article, you don't really mention how you did it. And then people start to think, how does the process of capitalizing on the rapid equity gains in your properties was repeated to buy subsequent properties through your SMSF? And not to put words in your mouth, but just to address the issue here with SMSF funding. If you believe that you can get a loan through SMSF, for example, the property is worth $800,000, you borrowed 80% against it under SMSF. Back in the days, you could. Right now, you can do maybe 70 to 75, but sometimes 80 if the property is solid, like a house. Assuming you got a loan of $640,000. Now, the process that you were talking about, how you were capitalizing on the equity, I hope people don't misunderstand that you drew out equity from the property, which means if the property went up to $1 million, you could then borrow 80% against 1 million, which 640 minus the new lending, you pulled out equity of 160K. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just saying this cannot happen in SMSF. In normal lending, regular lending outside SMSF, it would work. But in SMSF, you cannot draw out equity from your property once you obtain a loan from the bank through SMSF. You cannot do this. You can read up the Superannuation Industry Supervision Act, which is a SIS Act. No lender that is doing SMSF lending at the moment will allow you to do this, okay? Put it in your head, guys, who are reading this article. You cannot do this if you're thinking that's what he did. Because there's flaws in the strategy. You mentioned you don't pay any capital gains on properties in SMSF if you're retired, okay? But then you didn't actually buy and hold these properties until retirement, unless retirement is 32 years old for you, because one of your super investments was a property he bought for $150 and sold for $275, which means outside of retirement, you got to pay capital gains tax. So it's safe to assume SMSF is just one of the vehicles he uses to leverage properties that are doubling in value and blah, 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 right? But don't assume he just used his $40,000 super, then, equity went up, he leveraged it, used that to buy another property under SMSF and boom, 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 $2 million. So hopefully when you're reading this advertorial, when it goes, kind of dumb way the investor turned 40K into a fortune. Well, it's kind of vague way an investor turned $40,000 into fortune. And make sure you do your due diligence on the vagueness, because that will get you in bloody deep trouble. Jump in the comments and let me know what you think.